Hello, I'm Jan. I finished Indian studies this year, and I was looking into the history and development of the Tamil script. And one of the parts of that was the orthography reforms of the script. And I thought it might be a good idea to share some of that with you. How many of you is familiar with the Tamil script? Excellent, almost everyone. So that's going to be very helpful to you. I'm glad we have colleagues before me kind of introduced you the system before, so I'll just go through. Tamil is in the very south of India, amongst the other Dravidian languages, but also has considerable sort of diasporas in Malaysia. There's over 1 million people, and in Singapore, and they tend to play important roles when changes are supposed to happen to script or language. So as we have seen before, the script is based on the Brahmic system. There is sort of base letters consonants that have implied vowel, usually a, and then you add marks to them to denote different syllables. So in Tamil script, it happens we don't have the aspirated consonants, and we don't have the voiced consonants either. And we also don't have the sibilants. But don't be too sad, you do have a couple of letters exclusive to Tamil. And then also, so this is how the modern Tamil alphabet looks like. That's probably all the introduction you're going to get, so remember this. And there is a few letters coming from the ancestor, from the Grantha script, that is used to, these are used to write words and sounds that are not native to Tamil, right? Usually from Sanskrit or other languages, foreign languages. And that happens because Tamil script sort of is a mixture of Grantha that came from a different variant of Brahmi and Bhattarata, which come from the actual Tamil Brahmi. And also, obviously, if you want to, there is a lot of conjuncts in index scripts that you usually have to learn, while the situation in Tamil is slightly simpler. There is basically one productive conjunct in Tamil that takes other vowel signs. So how do you make them sort of the syllables that don't have the implicit vowel? Well, as an example, I picked a great word I found in a dictionary to attempt by magic to relieve one who is panic stricken. So, and as you will see, Tamil does like to double consonants, right? So there's two T's, two K, two P's. So the way to remove the implicit vowel is to put a dot on the letter, which is called puli in Tamil. So first thing you have learned, Tamil is very easy script. And if you ever wanted to learn any script and you are worried that there's a lot of to learn, Tamil is the way to go. Okay, moving to something that is actually printed so that we can establish that we can reform. This is a very famous, first book published in India in the native script. Happened to be Tamil because there happened to be a press by the Portuguese guys when they came in the 16th century, which was not supposed to be there. So they made a couple of books. Then they went away, and then eventually, at the beginning of the 18th century, another famous example, there was a print press set up in Tranquebar. And again, this is well, I didn't tell you before, but again, this is a sort of the New Testament. There was Christian missionaries doing the best, obviously. So there's a couple of interesting things you can see in this form of the script. There is no spaces between words, but you also can see that there is no dots, right? We have the double consonants even in the Jesus Christi, and there is no dots for that. These two signs are not the same letter. One of them is Ra, and one of them is a vowel A, and you cannot tell which one, right? And even here, you cannot tell which one it is unless you know the word. And a similar situation is with the vowel sign here, that one denotes short vowel, and one time denotes long vowel. It's long E, and it also is used in O vowel. and you cannot tell which one it is. So we get an Italian Jesuit who comes, Constanzo Beschi, and he wrote a grammar book in Latin of Tamil in 1728. And he is sort of perceived as the person who did the first sort of orthography reform, and he's credited with three things. One is introducing the puli to distinguish the syllables that don't have the implicit vowel. One is to resolve the ambiguities with what I said, right? Between the ra and the a, and between the long vowel and the short vowel. So this kind of reform happened by just him publishing a grammar. And then there was not that many people publishing books at the time, right? So it just kind of went on. But it also turns out it was not exactly that way. So if you read the actual introduction to the grammar, he does not come up with the idea of making a puli. And nowadays, we also know the puli is used in epigraphic evidence, in inscriptions on stones, which he couldn't have known before. What he did, he referred to a historical grammar of Tamil Nadu, where there's a system of marks called puli, which not only includes the dot to remove a vowel, but also there is sort of a macron-like sign, which you can see here, that is to denote the short vowel. And typically, they are only to be used where it's ambiguous what the word could be, right? So you still have double consonants here, but they don't have the puli because it's pretty clear, because of the grammar basically. And here it's not that here it could be one or it could be one pen, so there is a mark of an implicit a. And so this is the dictionary. This is a published dictionary from the beginning of 19th century. So this is like 100 years after Beschi. But I also hear you say, what is this? Because this is not a Tamil letter I've shown before. This happens to be a conjunct. And so it turns out Tamil actually used conjuncts quite a lot. It was not that many, it was not hundreds of conjuncts, but there was about, let's say, 10 to 20 conjuncts for a lot of the common double letters, right? Ku is a dative marker, so we write it a lot. And so especially in manuscripts, there's shortcuts to do that, but also we do have a typeset books with a couple of the conjuncts. So, and you don't see that now. So this is the second learning for today. Tamil used to have conjuncts, and it's exciting that I probably double the number of people who know that. All right, so for the ra and a distinction, Beschi himself actually describes a practice where this is happening, right? So one way is you add this little line in the bottom in sort of Sanskrit fashion, as it says. The other way to do this is to add the marks I taught before. So this is not his invention, it's already been in place. And if he was inventing it, there's actually a different case, which is with the several la, which could also be the ow, used for the ow vowel. And you cannot tell which one it is, except that this doesn't really occur in Tamil. Interesting thing I wanted to point, it depends on which source material you look, right? So this is the original book published of Beschi with sort of handwritten letter forms, and you can see the marks are a little bit off. Here's a reprint in Latin as well, sort of 100 years later, and it has the marks, it's not very seen, but it has them on the letters. And here's an English translation, which is 40 years later, and they don't use the marks at all while explaining the marks. They use the modern tick in the bottom. So you cannot really figure out what the situation, what the author is talking about. And it's similar with the marks. I said in this print of Latin, they don't even use the circle he's explaining here. It's not in the text. And these marks are different in different editions. So I guess that's another thing. If you're looking for changes in orthography, you should be referring to the work that the author is talking about it actually produced. Right, and here are another example of that is the distinction between the long and short a and o vowels. And that is actually a thing that Besky invented, so that he is rightly credited to do. But it kind of goes to slightly different than, for example, I expected when I was an economist, right? When you see this distinction, you just see either one loop at the bottom, or you see one loop at the bottom and one at the top. But if you look at how he explains it and describes it, that's not how it was born, right? The sign originally had like this big belly button and a big belly at the bottom, and then he just added small loop at the top because that's how you add long vowels in different vowels, right? You want long e, you put a tiny loop on the top, or the same, right? So this is just a sort of lengthening mark to already in a sort of established shape, like a symbol shape with identity. Right, and I would also note that that happens for the initial vowel E. So nowadays you use the one that comes from grandpa, is a long E, but there are also usually publications that use this sort of loop-de-loop on the top to mark a long E. And it has been in print also in several publications. Okay, so I hope I'm doing good on time. Yes. Let's move on to the other reform I want to talk about. So this is sort of the whole syllabic table of the Tamil. We have the consonants here, vowels on the top. And as you can clearly see from over the distance, there are some irregularities. For example, this column is referred to the I, and they all begin with this sort of double loop here. But some of them don't. Some of them have just like an elephant trunk in front of the letter. And the same with long R, right? The R symbol, it looks like the Ra, we have seen that in all of these, but some of them have just a big loop instead. And this has been fixed by the orthography reform that has been issued by government in 1978. They regularized all the I and I vowels, and they also tried to get rid of the I and OU vowels completely, replace them with Y and V, but they didn't go very well with people, and so they had to revoke that bit the year after. And this reform is usually credited to Peria and it has been introduced on the centenary of his birth. In fact, it is not as easy as that, right? The history of that reform is much more complicated, and I have to filter out the timeline here quite a lot to just keep to the important points. So already in 1915, so this beginning of the 20th century is very turbulent in India, especially in South India. There's political parties formed. There is a movement. There is a sort of identity and cultural identity movements. And one of the movements is for the clean Tamil. And there's people who say, we don't want any of these granta characters. We don't want to write these foreign words with foreign letters, right? We can perfectly do with the letters we have in the clean Tamil. On the other side, we have another group of people, also Subramanian Bharati, a famous writer in that group, saying, we will actually need more letters to be able to represent all the sounds as we globalize and publish publicly in different countries, to be able to actually faithfully represent the sounds in different languages. In 1930, Kumaram was a magazine, like a weekly newspaper, and at some point it printed the whole first page with the regular R and I, and an article about how these irregularities are difficult for children to learn, and we should get rid of them. We should fix that. And there was some support from other newspapers from Singapore as well, who also added the idea of cancelling the I and OU vowels, and mentions the sort of the long E with the loop to the top, used in textbooks for children again. Then 5 years later, there's a new weekly coming up called The Republic, and it's been advertised as published with and so we are already in the 30s, and we are publishing sort of in what the final reform has become. And there has been no sign of Periyar yet. So Periyar comes now, so the new Republic is printed with this sort of reformed alphabet. And in the second issue, I believe, Periyar sort of supported the idea of the spelling reform. And it was, his arguments were more ideologically based, right? You need to adapt to the modern paper and press process, and we don't need to stay behind on paper. And sort of and it is also happens to be difficult to learn for children, but the narrative kind of goes into the background here. So now there's a bit of a silence because India was a bit busy. They tried to imply Hindi language on them. Then there was war, and then there was independence of India. So they didn't have much time to deal with orthographic reforms. But then again, after the independence, government creates a committee, and I haven't put all the committees that have been created, but the main committee created by government that is tasked to present a reformable script so that it can be typeset fast on the linotype machines, because it has a limited sort of number of characters that it can fit in a way that it can print fast. So that has been done. There has been some preliminary report, and 2 years later, Svadash Metran, the biggest sort of daily in the Mladu, they have a trade union anniversary meeting, and the minister says, basically, this is rubbish. We cannot compete with the English media because it just costs too much money and time to print with this language. We need a reform. And so the government comes to them and says, well, we did have a committee a couple of years back. What do you think about what they said? So they looked into that, and they were like, okay, that sounds good. And they made more committees, and they expanded the recommendations. And there was a final recommendation of the committee in the 1950s that the regulation, as we have been talking about the whole time, they suggested the sort of Tamil origin long E. They also suggested distinguishing the La and Au, the same way they did for the Ra and A, which is quite clever. And they also suggested to separate the vowel signs for E and E because they tend to be irregular, and you can sort of detach them from the letter and save, stocks to print. So that looked good, except that in 1952 there was a new government elected, and they were not so keen on, performing the reform because, well, some source suggested that they had already printed a lot of textbooks with the old script, and they just said people didn't like it, and it's up to whoever wants how to print them. So then nothing was happening for a while, and then again this comes up back in the late 60s and 70s. There's many conferences and symposias saying, hey, we should do a reform, right? And we should fix this. And eventually, I need to skip quite a lot of things. We got to the place that the 100 years of Periyar birthday is coming. Periyar was a big social activist. He believed in equality for women's rights, abolishing caste system, and everything on that. But he also happened to support the orthographic reform. So government said, well, we can do, at least one of his reforms, great ideas, which was the script reform. So they issued the order saying it was, in the sort of Periyar framework. They mentioned nothing about discussing this 50 years already. And there was a bit of backslash, right? People are saying that there was no discussed with them, but that's kind of their own fault. And then the government was not really in Tamil Nadu, was not that really in rush to implement the changes. They kept receiving letters about and then all the magazines and the government issues that you should be using the new script as you ordered and you are not, and stuff like that. Eventually, in 1983, Singapore decided to actually implement the plan and have students sort of gradually come used to that, and it was used in exams and stuff. It was a bit more complicated in Malaysia, but then eventually they also accepted it. So in India, this took longer, and new ideas for reforms came coming, and they created a new committee for the orthography reforms because, as Periyar said, this basic reform they did should be only in the beginning. So there's like 20 more different ideas of what should be done next. Okay, and so we have seen all the motivations and narrative of why a reform should be done, as we have seen in the cited in the last talk. Is it to make children easy to learn it? It was to be able to print it easily. There was some ideology, and it was also there was some concern about recording sounds from different languages. And then the digital era comes, and what happens in digital? We have ASCII, and we don't really have many numbers to fit the letters for. So you would need to reform the script again to make it shorter. But that fortunately, well, it was a bit complicated. I don't have time for this. It's a completely different topic. But I want to say that again, it was Singapore and Malaysia who decided that they will go for it, that they will implement Unicode, because frankly, they didn't really have any other option, because they had other languages in the area than only Tamil script. And then India had to follow. I think that's all for me. Yeah, thank you. We have time for one question. One more question. Another question: with digital type making it easier to combine letters in exceptional ways, do you think there is any chance of reversing the 78 reforms that were implemented, or have they been so fully accepted that no one would want to go back? Good question. You can definitely have the old forms. It's just a matter of font. With a different font, you can have the old forms. It's not the case for the conjuncts, because, well, for example, some shaping engines like Direct Write has hard-coded the fact that Tamil does not make conjuncts. So you cannot even with a font make conjuncts in Tamil. Whether there is interest or not, I don't know. I haven't really seen many, and it is up to the possibility of reverting to the 80s, 78 reform is relatively easy with a font. So, is that?